it really helps if you have a pretty good understanding of who your competition is. It really helps if you come and be able to say, hey, these are the 4 brands that I see that I'm going to be competing with, and this is what I like or don't like about their current packaging. If there's a form factor that really works in your space and that's accepted and people really like it, it probably doesn't make a bunch of sense to change and try to go in with some crazy form factor unless you have something that's super amazing that people will really love. If you're doing a nutraceutical or a supplement, I would tell you to do a custom jar. Absolutely do a custom jar.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Today we have an exciting guest, Elizabeth Corbett. She has over 25 years experience in consumer products, my favorite category, in the packaging space. She's worked with Starbucks, Tiffany, Estee Lauder, and Culligan. She is currently the president of enterprise at AE Global. She mentors startups and advises on marketing plans, packaging development, sustainability, DTC versus retail, which I'm very excited to hear what she has to say on that, funding, sourcing, and all kinds of good stuff. So welcome, Elizabeth. So happy to have you here. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. We were just talking about how you are splitting your time, it sounds like, between Seattle and Miami. Sounds like 2 pretty fabulous places to spend time in.
It's only a 6-hour flight.
Yeah, that's true.
I joke that my husband and I point out that it takes me 7 hours to get to Portugal from Miami or 6 hours to Seattle. So it's a little crazy. People don't realize how far apart they are.
Yeah, I know. It's like opposite coast. I do Santa Barbara to Vermont, and it's basically like the the opposite corners that you're doing. Yeah, totally. Although Miami is a little farther south, but very fun. Well, I think it's important in the packaging world to always be doing research and out and about. So sounds like you're in, get out there, and I'm sure you scope out the market a ton and have great perspective. Let's dive right in. So most of the people listening to this podcast need to raise money at some point in time. If they are, let's say we've got someone listening who's has a consumer product and they think they need to go out and raise funding. From your perspective, what are some of the main things that they should be thinking about from a packaging standpoint to be successful in the fundraising process?
A couple of things are, I'm always amazed when I meet with people. And by the way, this happens at big companies and small companies. So it's not just a startup thing, is really having a good understanding of what your target COGS are going to be. Because, from a packaging perspective, I can design something that's $350 a unit, or I can design something that's 50 cents a unit. And we work with a really, really wide range of companies and cost of goods, et cetera. And you would be surprised when I start talking with people that they just don't have their arms wrapped around that yet. It's really, really important on a lot of things, but certainly in terms of packaging, having a good understanding of how you're going to go to market, right? Are you looking at a direct to consumer model? Are you looking at a retail model? Are you looking at something that's going to be like, a combo of that? That's one of those things that I think is really important as you're going out and looking for funding. And one of the things that I have found from a funding perspective is I participate with a number of different accelerators. I've mentored companies that have been more on the technology side, just because I'm originally from the Pacific Northwest. My husband is a chief security officer, so my world has had a lot of tech in it. We always joke that we work in really, really different elements. But then we also, I personally mentor and work with some CPG groups like SKU, which is in Austin, and also a number of others participate in things like Naturally Network and Startup CPG. And one of the things that I'm finding is to be more successful is to actually have your product fairly dialed in and already have some runway, have some business. I am currently working with a startup in Miami that has a really great product that's pretty timely. Anything to do with women's wellness, by the way, now is huge, and is going to be huge, and is and there's a yeah anything to do with women's wellness, and that could be anything from taking care of yourself postpartum to menopause. So, I mean, it's a pretty wide range, and also sexual wellness. And I know somebody who's coming out with a kind of a postpartum support product that, and I connected her actually with the folks with SKU, and their feedback was, we have a lot of interest in your product, but you need to be a little farther along the path. We want to see that your product is actually out in the market. I want to see some runway. I want to see some sales. And I think that overall in that world, 5 years ago, you could go to Expo West and people didn't care about if you were making money, and they didn't care where you were in the process. And things have just tightened up so much that people want to see where you are is, where are you in terms of your path to profitability? Not that you have to be there now, but what's your plan? And that would be the other thing that I'm seeing, because again, I've connected people. There are some really great accelerators out there. Particularly, I do a lot of work in the pet care space too, which is again another area where there's an amazing amount of growth opportunity. But folks want to see you a little farther along your path versus just, I have an idea.
No, that makes sense. And in terms of farther along a path, because packaging is expensive. Having packaging designed can be expensive. And I think a lot of times retailers and investors can tell when it's, was designed on the founder's Photoshop who has no design background, right? Versus a actual packaging designer doing the design and development and everything. So what's your take on that? I think because it can be expensive to do beautiful packaging, but it also can be a huge differentiator, right? And it can, I think it's hard to get a product into a big box retailer now without having your packaging dialed and your pricing and everything. So what are some strategies that startups can take to get that premium level packaging without spending a fortune on, design and development?
I think that like right now I'm working with a startup who came to us pretty buttoned up with really he's got a product that I think is going to work really. It's a definite CPG product. Understanding you brought it, it's really hard to get into a retailer, so we're working with him on a DTC model to start with, and then be able to take that and be able to take that into retail. And I'm sure he will be able to. But you can spend an amazing amount of money, right? And I've seen that. And there are branding firms that charge a fortune, right? For whom you can't get in the door for less than $100,000. And then all of a sudden you're spending $250,000. I don't personally think you need to do that. I think that you can get something that is definitely reasonable, something that looks, that will help you be competitive in the market space, help you have a great customer experience, and let's say spend in the $20,000 to $25,000 range. If you spend $5,000, it's going to look like you spent $5,000 and you brought that up. And certainly you can spend more once you have like more SKUs. What really helps, and where I see people spending too much money, is not being pretty buttoned up by the time you come to whoever your designer is going to be. Like, it really helps if you have a pretty good understanding of who your competition is. It really helps if you come and be able to say, hey, these are the 4 brands that I see that I'm going to be competing with. And here, and this is what I like or don't like about their current packaging. If you, same thing with whether it be the e-commerce packaging, et cetera. understanding sometimes that you're not going to be able to have the Mercedes at the very beginning. Maybe you have to settle for a Volkswagen, knowing that you'll be able to upgrade over time. Sometimes that's really hard for the the founder to deal with, right? They see who's amazing in the space, and they want to be just like them. And sometimes you're like, we can help you get there, but here's the step in between that makes a lot more sense for you based on your budget. And sometimes that's hard, right? That's their baby, right? And I totally get that you want your baby to be in the most amazing clothing ever, but sometimes there is a step in between. And those would be, but absolutely, because we do at my company, we do everything from structural and graphic design all the way through production and managing the full supply chain. And you have a really wide range of possibilities within that. And, sometimes people come to us thinking that they can have a budget of $2,500. And again, they'll be like, well, I can get a logo online for $1,500. And I'm like, I'm sure you can. Absolutely. And it's going to look like you spent $1,500. But you absolutely can get something decent. And the great thing is you should be able to sit down with whoever you're talking with and say, okay, what can I get for $20,000? What can I get for 25? What can I get for $50,000? What is that? What does that look like? And if you're working with a good partner and you're pretty organized, you should be able to keep those costs down.
Yeah, I agree that also having that, like, here's step one, stage one of packaging, but here's the kind of stage two of, where we want to get to. One mistake that I've made in the past is kind of trying to be too different and regretting it down the road. What's your thought on, you're looking at your competitors' packaging and how important, let's just say, for going into retail, because I think DTC is you get a little bit of a pass there because it's not right on the shelf. But, what is there a benefit to trying to be different and unique? Or if you have a good enough product and your product itself is differentiated enough, product without the packaging, can your packaging more or less mimic the competition and, be successful without trying to do, some crazy new innovative thing or expensive box that, has some structure that's not easy to make? You can over create these things and maybe you're not getting the benefit from it. What are your thoughts on that, on keeping it simple versus like really trying to differentiate your packaging at the early stage?
It's a couple different things. If there's a form factor that really works in your space and that's accepted and people really like it, it probably doesn't make a bunch of sense to change and try to go in with some crazy form factor unless you have something that's super amazing that people will really love. Like some of the stuff that I'm seeing with and I don't have one in my office. I have a lot of packaging in my office, obviously. And some of the things that we do are pretty cool. There are a lot of people for whom the squeeze with the spout, the squeeze, that works for a lot of things now, right? It totally works for anything to do with kids or even like moms on the go and stuff. So if I were coming out with a product that is in that market, I would probably just go with the same form factor because it's proven and people really like it. From a graphic design perspective, I would work on my branding to show how is my product different. Is it a really natural product? Is it something that's full of natural fruit or something that is tying into your brand that is going to show that, right? If I do a lot of work in the cannabis space. And there are a couple of brands who are using real fruit in their edibles and have a lot more natural products, and they show those on the packaging. I think that makes a ton of sense. I do think in the nutraceuticals and supplement space, you have a lot of opportunity to do custom jars, custom sizes. Same thing with health and beauty. Here, I have some here. This was done in a, sorry. This was a line that we did all the jars for they were different nutraceuticals, and they set themselves apart. And the idea there was that it was a product that it would set itself apart on shelf, and then also set itself apart. You could also use it in e-commerce. It was both. So, and the interesting thing is, if you're doing a nutraceutical or a supplement, I would tell you to do a custom jar. Absolutely do a custom jar. Absolutely. Because literally the only additional cost is the tooling. And you have to have enough time. Make sure you have enough time to do it and to do the tooling. Same thing if you're doing anything like shampoo, conditioner, any of that, because the only additional cost is the tooling. You're going to pay the same if you're buying $50,000, 50,000 of that bottle. Your price on the bottle doesn't change. Literally the only additional cost was the tooling. And to have that bottle stand out on shelf, like Jennifer Aniston's brand, Lola V, totally stands out. I could spot that anywhere. And so that would be something that I would absolutely do custom. Same thing with liquor. If you're doing any kind of, again, the only additional cost is the tooling and the time. So make sure that you go ahead.
What's rough cost, like ballpark or range for tooling for, say, a shampoo bottle or something like that?
It really depends. So shampoo bottles aren't bad. I mean, so custom tooling can range anywhere from $700 to $25,000. It completely depends on how big your structure is. Is it plastic? Is it glass? Is it child resistant? It's just way too different range. But, I keep these on my desk, the pretzels.com. That's something that completely changed the form factor, right? Everybody thinks of pretzels as being in a bag, and that they've done a great job of completely redefining something in a space and redefining a whole customer experience and everything. So, I mean, I'm a fan of custom if you have enough time. It's really more about having enough time than anything. But also keeping in mind, don't come up with something custom just to do something custom. Is it the olive oil that is now doing the squeeze, which I think is
Oh,
genius?
yeah. Yes, totally. I've seen that. Yeah.
That's totally genius, because how often, so I buy my olive oil in Seattle at a Lebanese store, and it's in the world's biggest jug. It's huge,
Yeah.
right? It's huge. And it's amazing. It is so good, but it's awkward. It's a pain in the butt. So I put that into another container. Otherwise, I'm spilling way too much olive oil. But the whole squeeze olive oil thing, that's genius, because that's another how to be able to get just as much as you want. Because even in my little thing that I do, I end up with more than I wanted.
Yep. No, that's so true. Awesome. I love that. In terms of like minimums, what do you see in doing a custom tooling versus, if a startup comes to you and they're willing to work with something that's existing, what kind of minimums are you seeing co-packers or the packaging, suppliers require at this point?
I'm the easy part, because my MOQs are smaller than the co-packer. So for a lot of stuff, my minimum is probably for custom, probably 10,000, sometimes down to 5,000. What I find is my minimum is not the problem. The minimum from the co-packer is usually the problem. The minimum from the co-packer is probably going to be, it depends. I've worked with some folks where they're dealing with a minimum from a co-packer of 50,000 or 100,000. I'm the easy part.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, minimums are fun to deal with when you're starting out. Very cool. So, okay, let's talk sustainability. What trends are you seeing, and how important is sustainability in packaging that you're seeing right now?
I like to say it's table stakes, and it didn't used to be. I grew up in Oregon, and I went to the University of Oregon, and my family had a half-acre garden, and I didn't even know that we were sustainable while we were being sustainable, right? I think that
Yeah.
was more of maybe probably more of a Pacific Northwest thing. I never had to buy a vegetable in a store until I was in my
Wow.
20s.
Oh, that's
Um,
amazing. Oh my
yeah,
gosh. Good.
it
Yeah.
was sad when I had to start doing that because I got to say the quality's not the same.
Yeah. You're like, wait,
Um,
what is this?
what is this, right? So the best way that I could describe how the world has evolved in this is that about 7 years ago, I worked on a pretty amazing opportunity where I got to work with a company where they were launching 6 new brands at the same time. And it was amazing, and 6 completely different brand families in terms of the packaging and everything. And then everything's done. I get a phone call from their marketing department that says, "Hey, I need to know what's sustainable about our new packaging," because it had never been discussed. Now, I have a long history. I worked on the paper side of packaging for a really long time. So I naturally will specify and pick the most sustainable product that I can, just in who I am, and I'll always offer that. So was able to dance around it and help them build a story, but it it, it wasn't the right way. You know what I mean? That should be the conversation up front. In total contrast, I've been working with Culligan for about a year. And in the very first meeting that I had with them at the beginning of this year, working on a complete rebrand of their zero water line, there was a person in the room from their sustainability team. And so that's how you've watched things change in the last 7 years. The big thing about sustainability is that um, my goal is for you to be able to, whether it's rebranding something or building something new, is that you should be able to have the most sustainable option as possible without impacting your cost. So because that's the other thing is that when when paper was first starting, when people were really looking at sustainable options, and one of them was FSC, which stands for Forest Stewardship Council, which means that it just means that the paper is sourced in an appropriate way. Maybe it's recycled, et cetera. And when it first came out, it was expensive, right? I mean, when people first started doing post-consumer papers, they were really expensive. And I was doing a lot of work with Nordstrom, and I sat down in a meeting with Nordstrom, and we were looking at their catalogs when we still did those. And they were like, "Yep, we want to move everything to FSC." And I said, "Okay, that's going to add about 25% cost to your paper." And then their VP of marketing looked at me and said, "I don't want to be that sustainable." So, and so that's fair, right? You can't tell the company to. So what we were able to do was work with them to make their catalogs smaller, a smaller format. And so it ended up being basically a net zero in terms of change of cost, but they made everything FSC. The other thing that's great from a sustainability perspective is when you're using less packaging, you're actually being sustainable. So that's one of the things that is. There's a lot of choices. We talk about the substrate. We talk about how big it's going to be. We talk about how you're going to get it to market. Where are you having your product made? Where is the packaging made? Is it recycled? Is it recyclable? My company owns a facility in the Dominican Republic where we gather and process what would have been ocean-bound plastic, and then bring it back to North America to be able to be used in new packaging. So there are a lot of things, and even if you can't use that packaging, we provide plastic credits through Repurpose Global to help you offset, because sometimes you have to use plastic. There's no choice. So there are a lot of things to consider. The great thing about sustainability now is there's limitless options to help you make the best choice. And there is no one way to be green. There's not one way to be sustainable. There's lots of options.
Yeah, no, I think it's crazy. I have massive plastic guilt. I just can't get over like everything. And especially too, I think even compared to Europe, we do use a lot of packaging, right? But it's tough. That's what people have become accustomed to. And I do believe it is super important. So I'm glad to hear that it is kind of table stakes now, because it's just crazy the amount of packaging we go through. It's just, it's a lot, but it's an important part of branding. So you really, even as eco-friendly as you want to be to play in some of the spaces, packaging is still super important, right? And if you don't have sales, you don't get to execute your mission in any way, shape, or form, with your business. So it is a balance between being sustainable and doing what it takes to, get market share, which is tricky.
And it's hard because, people attack plastic, and I understand that, but what people don't understand is it actually takes it takes way more energy to create glass than it does plastic. It takes a lot more energy to recycle glass than it does to recycle plastic. And almost all the glass that we have in North America comes from China and Taiwan. So shipping is the number one violator to our atmosphere. So it's always, I like to say it needs to be a holistic conversation. And like one of the things that we've been doing for a number of customers recently that I love is the concept of getting the really nice jar for your supplement. And that's and you can either buy that at the store or you direct to consumer. And then you get refills that are actually inflexible, and your flexible is maybe 40% post-consumer. It takes up a lot less space. It's made in North America. And so it's all a balance. And there's so much research being done right now in terms of flexible packaging to have long-term great compostable options and biodegradable options. It's a continually evolving marketplace.
Yep. No, that's great. I love it. Yeah, I'm just waiting. Do they have the little germs that eat the plastic yet? Is that a real thing?
No, it is actually,
the bacteria or whatever that is.
So I said that I worked on the paper side for a really long time. I worked for a paper mill for 17 years. And what people don't realize is almost every paper mill has its own water treatment plant. And so I learned a lot more about water treatment and bugs than I ever thought I would when I worked there. But it's very important to take care of the bugs. And you have people that's their whole job is making sure the bugs are okay, because they're the ones who actually eat all of the waste, if you put it that way. And I know at least the company I worked for, the water that we put back into the rivers was cleaner than when we put it out. So, the bugs are important, man. I learned way more than I thought I would. You didn't know you were going to talk about bugs today.
I know. That's awesome. Oh my gosh. Okay, cool. So another, I think, important way to stand out that you mentioned, and I'm a huge believer in this, is kind of, either special makeups or limited time offers. The brands I've worked with in the past, huge success doing that. A lot of the brands I know and love today still do that kind of stuff. What's your perspective on a startup leveraging limited time offers or special makeups to kind of get into a retailer, maybe an exclusive with a retailer, or, how important or how successful do you see that, going right now for early stage companies using that strategy?
I think it's huge. I think it's absolutely huge. And I think that it can be utilized for a couple of different things. One is from a influencer perspective. I'll actually show, this was a piece we did.
Watch on YouTube if you want to see the fun things she's pulling out.
So this was something we did for Wall Clipper. And they only did 75 of them. And you opened it up and it was for a brand new professional tool. So this went to really, really high. I mean, like the top, I don't know, barbers. I don't know what you call it. They're not a barber at that point. Right. But that would be an example where they only did 75 of those. Right. And, was all over YouTube. It was so funny. I knew exactly when it had hit, because all of a sudden it was like, oh dang, those things are everywhere. Right. And it was so successful that they did one more order. So they must have had some, people going, hey, what about me? But what a great way to get out information with, I'm guessing, not a lot of advertising, right? That just I mean, I'm sure it was all over TikTok, all over Instagram. So that is absolutely huge. And then if you're a startup, it's also a great thing to send to anybody you're looking at for financing, for
Yeah.
fundraising.
Yeah.
They can really have a dual role. I'm seeing in a lot of different industries this whole, I mean, I've even had inquiries from people like Kellogg's looking for stuff for limited time offers. You have the Kelsey brothers now took 3 of their favorite cereals and merged them into one for like a limited thing. And I mean, it got a lot of press, right? It got a lot more press. I don't think Kellogg's has had to advertise that, right? Or General Mills, or I can't remember which one did it. And I'm getting a lot of interest in it. Even a lot of seasonality. Candy's doing something that's special just for Halloween, and it's only available until it sells out. I'm trying to think of, I'm literally seeing it in almost any business that you can think of right now. It's not limited, right? Because people will ask me, I was like, oh, it's just happening in this. And I was like, no, it's happening in everything. And it generates so much interest. I think one of the companies that's done the best job of it is Pop-Tarts. Oh my God.
Really? Oh,
They did. They sponsored the Pop-Tarts Bowl. And they had this giant Pop-Tart, right? And then they put it in a giant toaster, fake toaster, goes in, and then out comes the world's largest Pop-Tart, real Pop-Tart that the winners are like eating, which I know some people thought was kind of gross. But I mean, it was like, kind of
got
scary.
attention.
Like the guy
Yeah.
got attention. But they've done a couple of other things like that have gotten, I mean, hey, it got me thinking about it, right? I'm a celiac. I can't eat Pop-Tarts. I wish. But I cannot tell you how much stuff we're seeing. I have a customer right now that we're working on something that was a special wooden gift box edition of a product. And we worked on it that's the one thing I will say about LTOs is like, just be really thoughtful, because if you have enough time, the more time you have to get a great product. And it's not the production time. It's more of like all the back and forth, but we have this really cool, it's a wooden box. And the biggest thing was making sure that we didn't glue the foam inside, because somebody's going to want to keep the box and not have the foam and everything. And that is, I know they did a kind of like a pre-advertisement for them. We haven't even shipped them yet, and they're sold out.
Wow, that's amazing.
So that's huge. The other thing, believe it or not, is advent calendars are huge.
So brands are just doing their own little advent calendar. Oh,
yeah. I wanted to see. This is, isn't this beautiful?
Yeah, I noticed that back there. Wow.
Yeah. It's launching. We just shipped them. So those are in stores. I think they're in stores like this week. But advent calendars are another thing. It's great. It's fun. It gets people's attention. And you don't have to call them advent calendars. You can call them holiday calendars, whatever. I don't even know I think they call it a holiday calendar. I'm not trying to be inappropriate.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Yeah.
But anything that you can do that generates some excitement, gets people to go into the stores. I'm a big fan of the LTO. I just think, and again, it can be direct. And if you build what do we call a scarcity? Right?
Totally.
Right?
I think there's so much stuff floating around that anything you can do to grab attention and make people feel like, give them something unique too. I think everybody is looking, especially around the holidays, right? Looking for something unique. I love the idea of like a box that you can use after. Again, I love stuff like that. I think that's great. So if a brand comes to you with an idea, can you help them basically, hey, here's my product. I want to come up with a gift set or something. Walk us through the process of they get there, you present, here's all your options, here's costs. How does that process look if they did want to put together like a limited offer or a holiday pack?
I just had somebody come in last week, so it's easy to talk about the process. So the first question, some basic questions: how many do you want to do? Do you have a target cost? I just met with somebody, and basically I showed them everything from something that costs $5 that's something that costs $350. So there's I did something for somebody recently where they were really looking for something that was so high end that it would be the gift they would give to somebody like Jay-Z, right? So that's the item that's $350. But then we've also done some great things that were $5. So knowing kind of what your budget range is, how many do you want to produce? Do you have current branding? Do you have like some idea of, do you want it to have a soft touch finish? Do you want to have spot UV gloss? Are there things from an aesthetics perspective that really represent your brand? What do you want to go into the box? That really helps me. Is it something that's going to be fragile? Is it not fragile? Is there something that we're going to need to do some sort of like, we do custom printed tissue a lot. And I have a great source where we do it in Asia and it's really inexpensive and I can get it in like 3 weeks. So that's not something I can get done in the US in that timeline or the price or the quantity. That's something I have a low MOQ on when I went to China. So that's those are the, I think the big things, and really understand, what are you trying to accomplish? Like in that wall clipper box, it was like, what are you trying to accomplish? Right? What do you want to make that person feel really special? You want them to keep the box. One of the best stories I have about that is I redesigned Tiffany's e-commerce packaging about 10, 12 years ago. And I still remember in the very first meeting that I had with them, and they did a really good job for me because they showed me not necessarily competitors, but some competitors, but 8 different brands that they loved their experience and they hated theirs. And I'll be honest, the Tiffany experience was pretty bad. And I asked their head of supply, their VP of supply chain at the time, I was like, Rona, what do you like about your current experience? Because I want to make sure that I don't leave anything. She goes, Beth, I hate it all. And I'm like, okay, let's, here we go. Right. And so it really does help me also if there's somebody's experience, somebody's brand that you love, and you're like, I want somebody to feel like that. In that case, they loved the Tory Burch experience. They loved the Tory Burch experience and they liked the Netta Porter experience. And that helped us as we were building their new experience. And because again, it's not that you want to knock somebody off, but it does really help. We just did a whole bunch of rebranding for one of the top companies in the world for toe straps. That's pretty exciting stuff. I was joking. I was like, I'm doing this and this, and that's okay. I can do anything. But it turns out that they are the premium player in the toe strap space, which I love. Right. So, and the best way I could compare them, and they loved it when I compared them to this, is I compared them to Craftsman tools. Like when I was a little kid, my dad would get a Craftsman tool because he would know it would last forever. I think that's the only reason he would ever go to Sears. And he would get a Craftsman tool, and you knew if it broke, you could go back and they would just replace it. And that's this company. They're called Rhino USA, and they are in Walmart, going into Walmart. But they were really helpful in all of the things that we needed to know to really understand who they were and who their brand was and who their customer is and who their competition was, and understanding what makes them different. And I think we've talked about, I do this all the time. My husband says I spike. But that's the big thing. We've talked about it before, is if you're coming in and you want to do a project like that, no matter what it is, whether it's an LTO, whether it's an influencer kit, whatever, is, really understanding your brand and what you want that customer or that influencer, whoever, what do you want them to walk away with? And in the Tiffany case, I still remember asking Rona, I was like, what do you want out of this? And she goes, I want somebody putting their unboxing experience with Tiffany on Instagram. That's what they would consider a win.
Yep, that makes sense. Yeah, it's interesting. Like I could almost see making an argument if you have limited funds and you're looking to show traction with how hard it is to get into bigger retailers and stuff like that, starting off with a limited offer just to get some buzz, get some traction, get into a few, even boutique, high-end, trend-setting retailers with a really cool, package of some sort, get it in some influencers' hands, and then show investors, that buzz and interest around your product, and then showing, here's a more, day-to-day packaging for it afterwards. What are your thoughts on starting off like that if you've got really limited funds and you need to show traction and you're struggling to get into kind of retail?
I think it's a great idea. The other thing that kind of ties into that is finding a way to do a really cool limited time offer collaboration.
Yeah, totally.
A good example would be that is Butter London, which doesn't really exist anymore, but Nail Care, they used to do a limited time offer, and there were only 200 sets available with Pantone when Pantone would launch Color of the Year.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And it was really smart. And it was brutal. It was the kind of thing that somebody buys and then you see it on eBay, right? Because it was so hard to get. But that's great because everybody understands Color of the Year, right? And now you see it on everything, right? Home Depot and Martha Stewart and everybody. But if you can find a way to do a collaboration with something like that, I think that can be really, really interesting and drive drive a lot of attention.
Yep. No, I think that's smart. I think it makes sense.
And then make sure your collaboration fits your brand, because every once in a while I see collaborations where I just don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. You want it to be the similar target audience, right? So you're
or somehow at least adjacent.
Yeah. Compliments. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Wonderful. What else? Any other thoughts? Early stage entrepreneurs, and also how they can get in touch with you and what you guys do if they're at that point of looking for, developing packaging, and any other advice you have for them.
There are a lot of great communities now in the US for being with other founders. And I recently had somebody who found me through a podcast, and I directed her. She's in pet care, and I directed her to 2 different pet care accelerators that I thought might be a fit for her. So first of all, I'm a huge connector. That's one of the things I pride myself in. And there's plenty of things that I don't know how to do, but I know how to connect you with the person who does. So if you do have a question or you're looking for something, the best way to find me is on LinkedIn. I'm really responsive, and I'm pretty active on there. Going back to the community thing, there are, whether it's startup CPG, whether it's founder made, SKU, I mentioned, Naturally Network is another one that's very active and has individual chapters. You can even, I'm a huge fan of looking outside of your normal box when it comes to networking. And like, if you're a woman business, I would look at other kind of women organizations. I participate in something called Wonder Woman dinners. I've also had the opportunity. I now participate in something called Parlay, which is in multiple cities, and it's a great. And I'm a little biased only because I'm obviously woman executive, but there are some amazing opportunities to learn from each other. You just never know where you're going to find that next person that's going to help you get funding, who's going to help you, find that next way into a retailer. That's what I would say. And I'm not, there's lame networking events where you go and you're going to meet the guy who wants to sell you insurance. Not a fan. We've all been to those, right? Where, like, when I first started going to networking events, I was like, oh God, I don't think I can do this.
Yeah. You have to network to find the good networking events.
It's so true, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then I've even had I'm part of a women's group in Seattle, which I know has some other chapters, where we meet once a quarter and we each donate $100 a quarter and then find a charity to donate to. And I've met a number of really interesting women through that. That's how I found women. That's how I got introduced to women in sustainability. So that's kind of random, right? I was at a group about finding charities, and then I found women in sustainability. That I've actually met a couple of really interesting new customers through. So network to network. That's a good way to put it. But I'm a really big believer in some of the amazing women's organizations that there are now, as well as different CPG. There's also like if you're in Chicago, there's the Hatchery. And if you haven't heard of them, I encourage you to find out about them. And places like Skew and the Hatchery have events that are open to other people. And Startup CPG and Naturally Network are super active. And you don't have to pay the money to go to something like Expo West because it's a small fortune. My ticket this year was $3,000.
Was it really?
I feel kind of robbed.
Wait, just to go? Just for a ticket to walk the floor?
My ticket to walk the floor next March is $3,000.
Oh my God. How did that go up so much? Whoa.
And my hotel room for not a very nice courtyard is over $900 a night. And so I'm sharing a room with one of the people who works for me because both of us were just like, I mean, even though it's not your own money, you just don't feel good, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
So yes, so Mercedes and I are bunking. So I just, it just drives me crazy. So there's things that are so much money, but you know what? If you want to try to like jump on to something like Expo West, I know that Startup CPG and Naturally Network are going to have events there. So go to the events and don't go to Expo. So ways to get around that. Same with Sweets and Snacks, although I'm a big fan of Sweets and Snacks. That's a great show.
I used to love the fancy food show. Is that still going on? Yeah.
It is.
Yeah,
I'm going. January's in Vegas. I'm glad they moved it to Vegas. I wasn't loving the Moss County Center. And then it's July. July is in New York.
Okay. Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, trade shows are so great for packaging ideas. I mean, you can go to the store too, but obviously I think just doing some shopping is a great way to get inspiration. But yeah, I think trade shows. But I don't know about for $3,000. That's a steep ticket for a startup.
That's why I was going to say you're a startup and you're going to go, wow, that's too much money. But there are ways. There are ways to get in, and there are also an interesting thing. I know of two different people who are doing this, and if somebody wants to reach out to me via LinkedIn, I'm more than happy to introduce you. I have a woman I know in LA who's basically kind of versus you trying to figure out, like, have the money to try to get into multiple influencers. What they're doing is kind of putting together groups of products to be able to send out to influencers. It's a lower cost of entry. You're not having to do your own package, all of that. And they try to make sure that there's not conflicting products within that at the same time. So that's another, and I know of two people who are doing that now, which I think has some legs, right? Getting it. And they also know the people that you probably don't know. So I think that will continue to happen. And I think that that's probably a growth opportunity long-term to get people in front of people.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. It's kind of like a step above PR to actually like get a group of products in front of the influencer, have somebody with those contacts. And then your chances of getting attention are probably higher from the influencer because they're looking at a bunch of things at once versus just, the one-off things that they get in the mail or whatever. So that sounds like a great idea. I love that. Very cool. Well, I think people like you, connectors who've been, doing this stuff for a long time, incredible value. Anybody who doesn't reach out to you on LinkedIn, I think is crazy because a connection can lead to a connection, can lead to a connection, can lead to funding is what I always say. Sometimes it takes 6 intros, to get to the right investor or the right person at retail or whatever it is that they're trying to get. So that is amazing. I love that you do that. All those organizations you just listed, that is so valuable. Thank you for that. Also, I think can be hard, like we just said, just trying to find the quality things to go to or groups to, reach out to. So that's amazing. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. I love packaging. It's so fun. And it's just, I love seeing new stuff come out too. So I envy your job because you get to see all the fun stuff and develop cool things. There's so much creativity behind it. And I love all the stuff people come up with. So really fun having you on today. Anything else you want to add before we sign off?
On my closing note, because I think this is funny, is always introduce yourself to the person that you're sitting next to on a plane. Just never know. I found a new client that way. I found one of my best friends that way. You'd be
No
surprised.
way. Really? Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
one of my
That's
best
amazing.
friends for, oh geez, how long have I known my husband? I know Bill 27, so 28. 28 years. One of my best friends I met on a plane 28 years ago. Yep. And I have a customer that I landed last year that I met on a plane.
Oh my goodness. That's amazing. Great advice. Yeah, you just never know. It really is. If you're in the business of needing to make connections, like you just never know, and it's worth putting yourself out there. So I love that.
Absolutely.
Great advice. Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you so much again for taking the time. And we'll put all your information in the show notes so people can reach out.
All right. Thanks.